Yeah, about today's review, though. I know that usually whenever, like, we do, like, these, intros here, I come up with, like, some sort of clever little thing to say. But, like I told you, like, I couldn't find any lyrics for it, so, fuck it.
Yes!
And welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on all sides of Mississippi. In the way that we measure that, title is that we go from Ukraine to Uganda. This podcast is called Hey, Listen to This. And the two dashingly good-looking men that you're listening to happen to share the same middle name. I'm the one. I am the only. I'm the one who, just enjoys content for what it is instead of basing its worth off of the original intellectual property, Ryan James Kearns.
And I am the one, the only, the what the hell did you just say, Matthew James Durzik? And for those of you wondering what we do here on Hey, Listen to This, it's kind of right there in the title. We look at each other and say, hey, listen to this. And that involves picking out an album, a music album, for the most part, that we listen to, dissect track by track, pick what we like, what we don't like, what stands out, what doesn't stand out. And last week, Ryan, it was your turn to pick an album. What did you pick and what did we talk about?
So, I picked the conclusion of, the Sable Fable Project Rollout by Bon Iver. We we talked about in that review, we reviewed the first part of that project back in, late 2024, whenever it came out. And, whenever, like I said in the review again, I knew that as soon as, they announced that, oh, hey, we're releasing the rest of the project and we're calling it the whole project Sable Fable, I knew that we were going to cover it. Fantastic album. Check out the episode so you can hear our full thoughts and opinions. That episode is an hour and 40 minutes, so we have a lot of opinions and a lot of thoughts. And, I'm not going to spoil, the end rating there, but just know today, dear listener, Matt knows that, I bought the record on vinyl, so, one can say that I like it.
Yeah. For those, I won't spoil too much about it, but I know that the rules that dictate our usual vinyl mandate is anything above an 8, so that there's a little bit of a spoiler there. That's at least an 8. How much more? Well, you'll have to tune to the episode to figure it out. But I will say that that Bon Iver episode was probably our most contentious episode in a little bit, because I feel like we definitely disagreed on some things compared to the vibes we've been feeling as of late.
Yeah, and that's okay. It's okay for podcast hosts to have healthy debates and everything like that. We never come at each other being like, oh, you are stinky poo-poo head and you have no ears. I think the main takeaway from our debates there were that art is subjective and your ability to enjoy it within certain exceptions. We can talk about other albums that we've reviewed in the past where both you and I basically say this is crap. But we each come from our own different backgrounds, and we each bring something different to the table. So yeah, it's healthy that we both have our own perspectives, but we don't end up suffering groupthink in our reviews.
Yeah, we don't suffer groupthink. We are our own men. We have our own opinions. And with that being said, we're going to be talking about an album today. Unlike last week where we had different opinions, this week we are merely trying to have opinions. So the album that we are talking about today is called Fishnets and Cigarettes by the band Toledo. Now, usually we go down the arc of who the band is and what they are before we get into our own personal experiences with them. I'm going to reverse that this week because I feel it's necessary. Because I feel like to understand how I found this album in the first place will give indication of where we're headed. So, for those who have been listening to all our episodes, first of all, thank you. Second of all, you may recall during our, not last but before that, the Dolly Parton discography draft, I made mention that one of my selections in that draft, her 1989 album White Limousine, was a selection of mine because I had purchased it recently at the Rogers Flea Market in Rogers, Ohio. During that same trip, I also came across another album that I purchased for $1. It was on CD, and it was this one, Fishnets and Cigarettes by Toledo. Now, obviously, when you're at a dirt mall in Rogers, Ohio, you're not going to be able to be like, oh, what is this? Do you have like a preview I can listen to? Can I look it up? I mean, technically you could because we have that technology now, but I was just like, what, for $1, it's like a lottery ticket. I'll take a chance on it. And about a month later, I went for a walk and decided to put this album on, and that is when I realized, this is different. This is unlike anything I have taken the time to listen to hardcore before. Fast forward to last episode of this show, where I gave you the options between two weird albums, and I made you choose between Ohio and Maryland, and you chose Ohio. And I went with Ohio because Toledo, Ohio, you get the pun. But Toledo is not necessarily a band from Ohio. In fact, what they are is a band that comes from the West Coast. And now we get into what is a Toledo. A Toledo, as far as I know, is named after the lead singer of the band, Toledo Diamond, who himself is a actor, singer, and very much a, for lack of a better term, neo-noir cosplayer. Like, this dude has the fedora, he has the smoky voice, he has the outfits, and he basically wraps his whole outer exterior, or maybe his interior too, I don't know his everyday life, around this concept of being this very mythical status, old school, man of the night, man of the streets, man of the people. And the band that he has surrounding him is basically designed to back him up in portraying that scenario. Members including producer Danny Saber, bassist Neil Kane, pianist and organist Mike Boitos. I'm reading from the liner notes. If it sounds like I'm reading, it's because I am. Drummer John Brooks, saxophonist Spider Middleman, and several others that we'll be discussing throughout the course of this review. And from what I could gather, because this was one of the toughest intros I've had to come up with, because unlike many of the other acts we've talked about on this show, where you have several Wikipedia articles or notes on Genius.com, there is none of that with this album. This is an obscure band who, from what I can gather, has only one album to their name, and it's this one. Because I looked them up on YouTube. They have, I think, another single they released a few years later, and that's it. It's that album and this. And this album was released back in 1996, distributed by Moonshine Music out of Santa Monica Boulevard, Hollywood, California. So, what their music is, for those who are aware, is labeled, from what I can gather, as acid jazz. And that is a term I am only vaguely familiar with, because as a young kid without an internet, I looked up all the different genres that you can make of music on Windows Media Player. I saw acid jazz, and I was like, what the hell is that? And that's pretty much my knowledge of it up until listening to this album. And for lack of a better term, which we'll flesh out a little more during the songs, acid jazz is a bit of a mix of funk with jazz tones, or you can almost call it neo-jazz in a sense. It's very hard to describe unless you listen to it. It's like jazz, but with modern beats. And again, I feel like that's not too specific for this album, because this album is its own thing altogether. Yeah, that's the best description I can come up with for a Toledo. Ryan, your turn.
I really don't have much of a, at this point, usually in the, review here, I would give my background experience for, the band, which, okay, we're done.
Right.
But no, you were talking about the genre itself, like acid jazz, and how it, like, kind of it's like jazz, but incorporates like different kind of, like, like elements, and like the best way I can kind of describe it, like, is like it's like the new metal of jazz. Like, it's like just taking a genre and adding different elements in it and taking it in a new direction.
You know what? I don't hate it. I think you're onto something there. I don't ever want to hear what's his name, Fred Durst sing "Take the A Train." But aside from that, I think I know what you're on to.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a pound for pound for comparison, but it just seems like, around this time, I mean, I don't know, like, specifically when acid jazz was invented, but, like, we're talking about, like, the late 90s here with the release of this record. Like, you get, like, the new metal swing is in effect, and people are, like, starting to, like, blend genres and just try to, I don't know, maybe try to, because, like, we get out of the 80s, where everything was just, like, this very, like, creative and, like, futuristic kind of, like, sound with, like, new wave and, like, very polished. Then Nirvana comes along and just smashes all that, and everything gets a lot more grimy. I think, like, as we get towards the end of the 90s and we turn into, like, the 21st century, we return into, like, a more creative kind of, like, area for music. I mean, I'm just spitballing that off the top of my head, but yeah, it just seems to be very much of its time. And, like, also, like, outside of, like, the genre itself, like, like, around this time you get, like, the late 90s jazz revival with, like, Cherry Poppin' Daddies and, like, a couple other, like, artists, like, that I don't even know off the top of my head, but, like, it, like, we get, like, this album lands in an interesting time, and it's very much of its time, but it's incredibly unique.
It is, and I'm glad you brought up the 90s jazz revival, because that's where I was going to go a little bit too, because you start to hear a lot more stuff with horns in it, whether it be traditionalist jazz like Cherry Poppin' Daddies or the Brian Setzer Orchestra, or the rise of neo-ska with No Doubt, maybe early Street Right Manifesto. I could be way wrong about that. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, a lot more involvement of horns. What's the other one? Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. That's the other one I was thinking of. So yeah, horns are coming back, but it feels like this is before or right at the start of all that happening. Because I remember Cherry Poppin' Daddies had their song called Zoot Suit Riot, which was on the first Now That's What I Call Music CD released in the US, and that was in 1998. So I'm thinking this is either right before that or right on the edge of it. So this album might be a lot more influential than anybody's willing to admit, but if it is, it hasn't been publicly known, because I had no idea this band existed. I had no idea this album existed until the year that we are currently in recording this episode, which is 2025, some 19 years later.
So, yeah, I'm right there with you, my dear friend. So, I think I'm ready to get at her to kick off the review with the opening track here. Death Took a Holiday. And I'll let you have the pleasure of setting the scene here.
All right, I appreciate that. So the opening track is called Death Took a Holiday, and right out of the gate, you're greeted with this very ominous opening. that has drum roll, has a little bit of other instrumentation involved, and you get those very unique vocals of Toledo Diamond, very smoky, very raspy, definitely a Latin flair in there, and you get the words, "Now the big boys were angry. They were sinking their teeth into the night. The shooters were ready, and the air was tight. Me, I was walking on eggshells, trying to keep the rain off my parade. And they were dancing out on the main stem, 'cause death took a holiday." So, right there you hear the setting of this song. You hear him portraying himself as the man on the loose, trying to avoid people shooting at him. Why are they shooting at him? It becomes somewhat clear throughout the rest of the song, although I can't say it's supremely clear. Basically, it's about him taking a woman for a ride, through the city, just him and her, and everyone against that trying to shoot at him, and him somehow coming out the other side clean because, as he says, death took a holiday. They fired at me, but they did not kill me. Death was clearly not in my sights tonight. So that is the narrative part of the song. The musical part of the song comes in right after the intro, where we hear the drums come in with a very slinky groove, and that piano doing some rather nice club lounge type work. The sax and the horns, they sound like a mix of smooth and also occasionally uncomfortable, because they have the tendency, and this is all on purpose for the record, the horns tend to mode between smooth jazz lines and panicked squawks. And the panicked squawks are there to create the sense of dread, frustration, and oh crap, something bad's about to happen, which is a good move. I think this is a very good start to the record as far as establishing what it wants to be, establishing the type of music that we are in for. That doesn't mean I think it's a great song. It's not my bottom three, which for the record I do have along with the top three. But the one thing that drives this and a few other songs on the album down for me is not Toledo's singing per se, because I don't mind that. It's how the vocals were produced. Because I'm okay with there being a raspy, noirish, Mexican-American type of voice singing. But when they added for what I'm going to call, for lack of a better term, the telephone effect on top of that, to make it sound like he's singing through either an AM radio or a telephone, I did not like that at all. I thought it was overkill. I thought it was way too much. You don't need to add rasp on top of rasp. It becomes doubly raspy, and it creates for a sonically unpleasant experience. Which, again, is a shame, because the lyrics are good, and the music, I think, is good, too. It's not my top three, not my bottom three, but there were parts of it I liked, parts of it I didn't like, and the part that I didn't like really made me think, oh boy.
So, we might again have another episode where you and I are healthy debating, my friend. So, okay. Yeah, the vocals that are, you talk about, how they're produced, and I totally hear your beef with how, it sounds like it's just very, focused, and it's very just almost coming through it's shrinking the sound. It's not allowing it to fully breathe, and I see that as a very valid point. Full disclosure, before I get into more thoughts about Death Took a Holiday, this is in my top three at number 3, and I have a top 3 and a bottom nothing with this album. So I know, right? Exciting.
2 weeks in a row.
Yeah. But yeah, for much of this review, and you know this, but I'm going to let the listeners know, I didn't have access to any sort of lyrics. Like, I'm gonna have, like, occasional, like, lines that I really liked, and how, like, how the lines were delivered, and, like, just the overall use of, like, certain phrases. But in terms of, like, deep diving into, like, like, my favorite lyrics, and, like, how, like, they're really, like, constructed, I'm gonna rely on you to, like, shoulder the load. I don't know if you've ever seen Lord of the Rings, but you're gonna be, like, my Samwise Gamgee, carrying me into the Mountain of Fire. So
I have yet to see the movies, but I get the reference, and I also appreciate that because usually it's the other way around. Usually you're the one with a deep lyrical analysis, and I'm the one with the more or less going off of musical vibes. So this is a complete switcheroo for the most part on this episode.
It's in a reverse card, man. So, yeah, coming right out of the gate, like, my first impression of Toledo with how this track opens up the whole album, I had oh, fuck yes. Freeform jazz, put this right into my veins, and, like, don't call me until, like, Monday morning. So, like, the way that everything was produced, and, like, how, like, it just seems like this is very much my bread and butter when it comes to, like, just appreciating, like, jazz and this kind of music in general. Like, it bleeds on the edge of chaos, but it still has enough focus to, make it still enjoyable to the ears. It's not a Bitch's Brew by Miles Davis, but I mean, when we did our Charles Mingus review, like, there was a track off of there that I really liked. I can't remember the specific track, but, like, that track was bleeding on the edge of chaos, but not so much of, like, singing the track's appeal. But yeah, just you mentioned how, like, the pianos are doing, like, a very kind of loungy kind of thing. I do like how they're sprinkled in throughout the whole track, like, and the sax squawks that you're talking about. I'm always a fan of anything saxophone related, as long as if it sounds, like, decent. I mean, I've never listened to a Kenny G record, and I don't know if we will ever review a Kenny G record in our show. But I digress. Like, the way that it just seems like I took a lot of the sax portions. You said, like, they were, like, smooth to rough to, like, panicked with, like, the squawks. I just heard it as, like, pure freeform. Like, they were just, it was all rough, and I liked it a lot. And just the rhythm section, the bass is going to be a hero in this album for me, because the bass player here, like, he does an amazing job. And the drummer, too. Like, the rhythm section that they have here is top-notch. I love them so much. And, yeah, just the other thing that I really loved about this track is just the ability of the band to, really play with tension and have that tension and release. Like, I always love that, especially whenever, like, they lead up to the point, and then you get, like, the vocals underneath being, because death took a holiday. Like, that was just, I love moments like that. Overall, like, I'm coming out of the gate swinging in terms of, like, my appreciation for this record. I was just like, oh, dear sir, you didn't have to do that to me, but you can slap me again in the face with that fish if you want to. So, yeah, I'm a fan so far.
I feel like I may have accidentally just, like, thrown you into an entire barrel of fish and closed the lid on this one, if that's the vibes I'm getting from the first song out of the gate. But I will agree that the musical aspect of this song is very good, and the singing is good too. It does tend to get a little over-singing at times, I thought. But again, part of that was more or less the production and as much as the vocal performance itself. But aside from that, if you are able, dear listener, to go past the idea of it being super raspy on top of rasp, you'll probably appreciate this song too, because it is a good introduction to Toledo in album form.
So, shuffling on over to the next track, and the next track is called Danny. The way that it begins is absolutely just, I love it, man. It, like, you hear the guy yelling in the background, "Fucking cowards! Fuck you, Danny!" Like, I wonder, like, I don't want to say, like, I want to have that job in the studio, just yelling obscenities in the background, but I would say, like, if I were to have the job, it would be very therapeutic for me. And, like, it's just, for that to start out the whole thing, it's just, chef's kiss. And then, in the previous track, I talked about, like, how the bass player here will, like, feature prominently in, like, my review. And here is his first bass line that I really, 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 really sunk my teeth into. I loved it. It's so bloody tight. And one thing that I will say, to your credit, well, maybe not your credit, but I did think, at least starting out of the gate with Danny, the vocals, they were almost too much out of pocket without a purpose. Like, it just seemed like they were kind of directionless. But what I will say, though, like, as the song, like, does drag on, and it like, you get past the halfway point, the vocals get a bit better, which is a good thing for me. An incredibly unique thing here, on the instrumental front that I did appreciate about Danny is, like, you get to switch up from, like, the freeform kind of acid jazz that we've been experiencing so far with the record to, like, almost like what I would like to call, like, a traditional, like, bop solo section. And the way that that's signaled is with the instrumentals hitting, like, downbeats. And for those of you who aren't, like, familiar with what that usually does mean in, like, traditional jazz, that just means, like, a change up is coming, like, oh hey, like, someone's soloing and the drummer hits, like, a downbeat on the snare drum on the like, the actually hitting the, like, rim shot, like, it's to signal to the solo player, hey, like, a change is coming, you gotta duck out, you gotta finish up your solo. And I thought that was an excellent touch there. And, like, just the switch up between, like, the freeform section to the solo section was really nice. It was very refreshing to hear because, like, while I could, listen to, like, this acid jazz and this freeform jazz, like, all day long, it shows the artistic integrity and, like, growth and, like, diversity. Yeah, I think it's more diversity there that, like, Toledo and the band as a whole has the ability to switch gears like this. Danny didn't land in my top 3, but, like, I still did appreciate it, especially coming right out of the gate where the guy's like, fucking cowards.
Yeah, Danny is an interesting track. I mean, they're all interesting, but this one is interesting because, first of all, I think musically it does sound better than Death Took a Holiday, because I think the saxophone on this track sounds great. The piano on this track sounds great. And you mentioned the shift changes throughout the song rhythmically. I thought they executed those damn near perfectly. I thought those were really, really good. How they went from the sort of light funk swing to the more rumble jungle type of tom-tom driven beat. I did appreciate the drum solo towards the end of the song. That was really cool. And lyrically, it's basically, for anyone who's familiar with the song Stagger Lee, it's that, but with a lot more details. Because you get lines in there. I'll just go with the second verse. And Danny didn't know what he was getting himself into each time he spun through those revolving doors, and I know Danny didn't mean to end up face up, shot up on his mother's floor in the dragon's breath with a kiss of death all over his lips. Nah, I'm sure Danny didn't mean to end up quite like this, and I know Danny didn't mean to get so carried away. I'm leaving a word out there, but that's aside the point. Yeah, you can tell that Danny is just trying to get himself into a little bit of trouble, but he wasn't anticipating how much trouble he was getting himself into. And I do agree those background vocals, while they may not add a whole lot of context, they are just so funny to hear, because it's just this idea of this guy in the back. I'm reminded of a couple of bands I saw at the Blue Violet Cafe where you just heard background noises and yelps throughout. And granted, that was a different genre, but it's the same vibe of just someone in their element just screaming at the top of their lungs. And to be fair, Ryan, I can see you doing that as a side person, just being like, ah! But, you know. Aside from that, the only complaint I have is the same one I had for Death Took a Holiday, which is that the vocals are a little overall processed and it kind of sinks things down, but not so far down that it's in my bottom three. Also not my top three either, but I did appreciate it better than the opener.
So, yeah, it definitely starts to pick up the pace for you. So, yeah. Just a very, very interesting track, and I also do appreciate you giving me the nod there, being like you can see me being the guy yelling in the background, being throwing some obscenities up there. And I will say though, like, you know, I did make the comment that I felt like the vocals got out of pocket a lot. I would say on my last listen, before, you know, doing the reviews today with you, like I didn't mind it so much. I bumped up my initial rating of the track, but like, you know. I didn't include it in my top three for a specific reason, because the other two tracks, when we get to them, you know, you'll hear me gush more about it. But are you ready to kick it on over to the next track here?
Yes, the next track on Fishnets and Cigarettes is called Sonny and Lorraine. And right away I could tell that the vocals are sounding better. At least from a production standpoint, they feel just as processed, but it feels less raspy. And I don't know if that's because they toned it down or Toledo himself toned it down, but whatever it is, the vocals do sound better. He does oversing a few times on this track, which brings it kind of back down to the level of enjoyability of the other two. And those are pretty much the only negatives to that. And I made note that those kind of vocals that he has, particularly the doubled up rasp with his raspiness and the raspiness of the production, does make more sense when it's backed by a relatively rough, sparse beat like this is, compared to the rather smooth tones of Moments on Danny and more or less the entirety of Death Took a Holiday. The background vocals, once again, hilarious. Because they're just coming out of nowhere with a bunch of weird yelps that tend to add a tiny bit more context than they did the other time, but still ultimately is just fun to hear, because you hear, you know, Toledo do this sort of smooth, raspy type of vocal, and then you just hear someone yelling in the background like this, and it's funny. It's just funny. Aside from that, the backing band does great with that sparse tone that they bring. It's a very... It's basically more or less drums and bass than anything else. It's really not too much otherwise. There's a little bit of piano, a little bit of horn, but it's mostly just the drums on the tom and the bass trying to create this rough structure, this rough environment for this song. And it really does work very well, especially considering what the lyrics are, which is, to sum it up, about a smoke-stained, torrid hookup type of relationship. It could be a hookup, it could be a relationship, but when you get lyrics like, they made love like it was murder, underneath lamplights where iridescent raindrops fell like tears. She likes to let him hurt her, then she takes him to a place to love the heartbeat right out of her fears. I'm paraphrasing there. And kisses like fingers steal each other's breath. Yeah, Sonny and Lorraine are deeper than death. So basically, it's one of those relationships he's painting a picture of where they have a very volatile connection. Like, if one thing goes wrong, all hell breaks loose. But the romance they have between each other is so strong and passionate that it can withstand any other volatility that comes their way. Once again, this did not land in either my top or bottom three, but I did appreciate it for what it was, because it felt like this was yet another strong character piece, and one that matches its musical backing with the torrid, volatile nature of its lyrics.
So I don't think we're going to fight, man. I'm interested to see what your bottom three are, and I'm going to be honest, like, I'm curious to see what your top three are, because, like, you know, like, we're chugging along here, and, like, we're 3 tracks in, and you haven't revealed your hand yet, and I've already revealed, like, one part of my hand. Well, the only hand I have to play, because there's not a bottom track here yet to be found. There is one track, though, later on that I will say, like, you know, just did enough to, you know, keep out of a bottom track status. But going on to Sonny Lorraine, though, because that's the current track that we're talking about. You awesome job doing the dissection on the lyrics on your front. One phrase that I really did like in terms of just its use on a sonic palette front is the phrase "deeper than death," because that's repeated ad nauseum throughout, like, you know, a good portion of the track, and I feel like the way that the phrase "deeper than death" you know, comes across in the track, the drums play off of that pretty well, and the way that the drum, you talk about, like, the drums and the bass basically doing the legwork here on the instrumental front, and the way that they're able to lock into a groove, with the drums doing that tom work that you're mentioning, and, like, the bass work doing you know, the Lord's work here, like, it's just so aesthetically pleasing to the ears, and it's great to hear again that Toledo is able to do, like, you know, tracks like this, because again, they could have done, like, you know, 15 other tracks, like, you know, Death Took a Holiday, or they could have just went into, like, you know, a straight, like, you know, pop like song, like, you know, how we had, like, peaks of that in Danny. So I'm glad that they're able to do almost, like, I don't know, like, kind of like a shuffle, like a almost like a I don't want to say like a shuffle, but like a Latin theme shuffle, where it's just like almost like kind of like salsa based. That gets more pronounced later on in the album, when we get to the one song about the Cuban girl with a pistol. But outside of that, I do like when the sax does come in about a quarter of the way in. It's more pronounced. I do like that pop there. The guy that you mentioned, I'm just going to call the feral guy. He's not a hype guy. He's just a feral guy. He's just going on in the background and, like, just yelling random obscenities. I'm a fan of his work too. And I will say, though, like, there was a moment in the track where, like, it might be what you were referring to as him over singing it, where it just seems like he starts to swirl up and he's really kind of, like, really digging in to hit a climax in the song. I really did like that. I thought that was a really good part in the track. Sonny Lorraine did not do enough, though, to pop into my top three, but I still do like it a lot. And I will say, though, admittedly, what Sonny Lorraine do and what Danny does, like, we start out the album with Death Took a Holiday, which is a very pronounced statement, and then we get these two tracks, at least for me, where, like, it seems like these are album tracks where it's just used to transition further on into the album. They're good tracks, but, you know, you can ask me, like, you know, 10 months from now, oh, hey, remember Sonny and Lorraine? I'm like, what? Like, these have the potential to be forgotten tracks. If I can, it's a backhanded compliment, but it's a compliment that I have to give no matter what, regardless.
I think I'll use a term I used last week when discussing Bon Iver. They're album tracks, but they're good album tracks. They're tracks that fit into the context of the album, that you can appreciate while you're listening to the album, but not songs you're probably going to take on their own to be like, oh, I'm adding this to my summertime playlist, or I'm adding this to my jams playlist, or my gym playlist. It's just, you know, a solid song within the context of the album from front to back.
So moving on over to the next track here. Also, let's talk about like summertime playlists. Can't wait for us to talk about the title track here because that's going to be on my summertime playlist. I digress. So the next track here is called Downtown, and the hype guy or the feral guy returns right out of the gate. And I love him so much. He's my spirit animal throughout this whole record. And I'm just going to skip ahead tremendously while we're on the topic of the feral guy. I love how the whole track ends where he just screams, "Fuck it." And like everything just cuts out. Like, that was such an excellent touch. Overall though, like as a song, we get another shift in songwriting here where I labeled the track as like Zoot Suit Riot-esque, but it's more of like, it's like a jungle kind of feel where you get the horns doing that line where like it just seems like it's almost like a waterfall. And like I do like how that's in the background, and it acts as like in the previous track we got the bass and the drums doing the legwork here. I feel like in place of that, we get the horns that are used as the motif in the background. And I thought that was a great touch. Toledo's vocals here are really, really, really good. I do like what he's bringing to the table. And then we talk about my love for saxophone work. Here, we get the granddaddy of all saxes, the Barry sax, and mother of God, I am just that touched my soul. Shout out to anybody who's ever picked up a Barry sax. We are one and the same. We are all brothers and sisters in arms. But outside of the all the other stuff I mentioned, the drums again are doing some excellent tom work here, and it's interesting that the drums are not really doing anything traditionally jazz or. This is my first acid jazz, album that I've listened to. But instead of riding the hi-hat, hitting the snare drum, and everything like that, it seems like for at least this track and the previous one, he's executing excellent tom work. So I do like the use of that in this track. Yeah, I will say though, I would put this still in the same bucket of the previous two tracks, Sonny Lorraine and Danny. But I will say though the momentum of the album is starting to pick up a little bit for me.
So not a top track obviously not a bomb track, but not a top track for you?
Negative.
Okay, good. So like you said, we're probably not going to fight. Because this track for me, I will agree with a lot of the things you said. The jungle groove that is created by the band, particularly on the tom-toms and the Barry sax, is good for the most part. Those stood out. But this is my third least favorite track on the album, and I'm going to explain why. It's two-pronged. Number one, the vocals to me just came off a little too processed and a little too raspy. In this case, it sounded appropriate, but I didn't need the extra layer of rasp on this particular track. And secondly, and I think the big reason this track fell into my bottom three, are the lyrics. Which, for those of you who have small children or loved ones that are averse to certain languages, I would advise you to cover your ears right now. It's a backseat blowjob. It's a skinny skin knee chick about 15 in a stained dress looking up into the 40-year-old eyes of a fat slob. It's a sticky hand job. It's a rough job. It's a tough job. It's downtown. It's a good memory of a bad high. It's downtown. It's a gangster spirit in a dead man's eyes. What downtown is this? Don't get me wrong. I get what he's trying to paint, and I get what he's trying to go for, and I'm not going to even say he doesn't reach that conclusion. But to hear a somewhat atonal groove in a somewhat atonal voice, double layered with processed vocals, saying about that. I had to think about it, and I'm just like, I don't want to hear that. Again, not the worst track on this album. It's not the worst. We'll get there when we get there. But this one, I was just kind of like very much turned off by it in most senses. Again, if they took away the second layer of processing, I might have been kinder to it and just thought of it as a weird fantasy. But just something sonically about it, mixed with the lyrical content, I was just like, I'm good. No, I'm good.
That I would like to know if my opinions about the record as a whole would have changed if I had the lyrics in front of me. In terms of, like, you know, what I'm traditionally doing with our reviews, which is, like, you know, listening to the music, looking at the lyrics, and making notes. Like, I wonder if that would have an impact on me. And, like, you know, it's almost kind of, like, there's a saying that you use sometimes in our show here. It's good if you're not paying attention, if you're not listening to it. So yeah, it's just, you know, I just caught that, and I'm like, I would not that I wasn't aware of, like, you know, all the downtown lyrics there, because, like, you know, what you've referenced, like, I heard like a couple different times, but it wasn't a focus for me. Like, I knew about, like, the stickiness of it and, like, how much of a rough job it can be. But I was more hooked into, like, the instrumental palette and what they had going on. And maybe that was by choice and design with how the band was trying to orchestrate everything. Like, you know, they wanted you to focus on that instead of just how, like, rough and, like, you know, how, like, you know, downtown can be. Downtown where? I don't know. Maybe downtown Toledo, Ohio. We'll see.
Oh, wow. I didn't think of that, but that, you know, I mean, okay, I'm not even going to get into that. That's political debate for another podcast. But yeah, I don't mind. And again, I don't say any of that to be a prude. I mean, we've talked about songs of a sexual nature before on the show, which I've liked. I can name right off the top of my head. Casual by Chaperone or Juno by Sabrina Carpenter. It's not the content, it's more or less the content mixed with the aura of what it is. And I didn't think the music was strong enough in this case to save it from being a mostly unpleasant listen.
I can respect that. Yeah. So I feel like we're ready to move on from downtown. And I feel like we're ready to, like, you know, just experience some Saxface.
Yeah, some Saxface, which is one of the rare times you'll pretty much get the idea of what the song is from a title like Saxface in the title of Saxface, because this song is very much an ode to the power of saxophone players, and the lyrics are pretty discreet about that when they say, well, he's an ordinary Joe, but when the lights are low, he goes to a place to blow this world into the rhythm gets in you. When the altos and the tenors dance, it's the romance of sound, and the ground is sweat in the heels of hoofers and huggers huddled in a beat which is sweet and sour. He holds the power in his play in a world we'd all like to stay in. He plays in and out of the keys. Daddy-os say, please, 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 don't lose this groove. That's just about half the lyrics, and it's an ode to the saxophone player. And for a song that's dedicated to saxophone players, the saxophone work on this song is great. Like, it's no secret that the saxophone work, much like Death Took a Holiday, runs from smooth runs to very powerful squawks, which in a song about saxophones, you want to display what the saxophone does. Here you go. It sounds incredible. And the backing band sounds very much in lock with the saxophones. Somewhat similar to Downtown, but a little bit more polished and a bit more big band. You could kind of envision this being played on a stage with the big band in the back, you know, several saxophones, some trombones and trumpets in there for good measure, piano, stand-up bass, drums. It sounds like you're in a nightclub and they're playing this for the fans. I also appreciate the fact that I'm about 95% sure that these vocals are not processed, or at the very least, if they are, they sound much, much better than anything else so far on this album. And I think the way Toledo sings about his sax players is very noble, and again, he's in sync with the band, particularly on that part where he sings about the rhythm of the altos and the tenors and everything just kind of stops for a second. That was really good as well. So yeah, for the first time on this album, I found a track that was like, dang, I really like this. It is in my top 3, and we go from my third least favorite to my third most favorite in Saxface.
So we're starting to go on a run here. Are we going to keep up the the pattern here? Well, I mean, I guess we'll find out with the next track. But I do appreciate your love for this track here. It could have been a top 3 for me, but
Wow.
Yeah. So when we get to the other 2 remaining tracks in my top 3, because I did say Death Took a Holiday was my third favorite. I'll plead my case to the listener and to you. Not that I have to prove anything to you, but I mean, wow, that came across as unnecessarily aggressive. I apologize about that. But yeah, just overall with Saxface, there's not too much more that I can add. I mean, essentially, like you described, it's a song that's basically meant to show off the work of the saxophone, and I love how frantic the solo can be at times, where instead of what you would consider to be a traditional jazz solo, like a Charlie Parker or a John Coltrane. Now those two sax players right there, they're on the opposite ends of the spectrum of a jazz solo. Parker, you get the more traditional bebop kind of stuff, and John Coltrane has more of a frantic energy. I feel like this embodies more of the John Coltrane aspect, but takes it up to 11 in terms of the frantic nature of it. I was a huge fan of that, and I also did appreciate the false stop at the end of the solo that you did mention. I did like that as well. The band's ability to build up tension in the track is great. It's similar to how they did it in Death Took a Holiday. Not in the same kind of sense where the vocals come underneath, but just the way everything just builds up. It's really good. And yeah, just the overall vibe of it. I've been talking about in several moments in the record so far that we've gotten different flavors of Toledo and their ability to shift gears on a songwriting palette. This is what I would consider to be another shift in terms of just okay, hey, we've done the whole jungle thing with downtown, and now we're gonna do more of a funky kind of pure funk track, and it's I don't want to say it's refreshing, but it's good to hear that they're able to do this as compared to again, I not to sound redundant, but they could have easily kept up with the freeform stuff, which I mean they're eventually going to get back to in the next couple of tracks here. But it's nice hearing a band purposely veering off into a different direction. I'm a fan of Saxface. It works for me very well. I would put it as probably, honestly, a number 4 on the record. So
I can respect that. I will say I'm a little surprised, though, because I figured the tribute to saxophonists featuring great saxophone work would be a slam dunk for your top 3, but I guess I miscalculated on that one.
It's okay, man. When we get to the other tracks, you'll figure out why Saxface didn't do enough. I mean, comparing Saxface to Death Took a Holiday, I really do appreciate Saxface, but when Death Took a Holiday came on for the first time, I had the oh fuck yeah kind of reaction. So that's why that one took the nod there as the third favorite. So I think it's time we talk about the title track here, Fishnets and Cigarettes.
Agreed.
So, yeah, this song. For the... I'm glad that... Not that I'm glad, but, like, I don't have the lyrics in front of me, and I don't have to read them. You don't have to read them either, to be honest with you. But, like the lyrics and the overall, like, just the way that the song plays out, it's so fucking corny. But I love it so much in terms of just, like, the different kind of moments. Like, you know, more on the lyrical front, on the vocal front, like, you know, I do love the back and forth between the female singer here and how it seems like she's telling the story or like she's interacting with the male protagonist here and trying to seduce him or like trying to literally have sex with him. I don't know exactly what's going on there, but like, you know, there's a moment where she's like, yeah, pulled out my lipstick. And he makes a comment about, like, you know, putting the paint on or something about paint. And also there's a moment where the lead singer just says, climax! Like, that was absolutely just funny, hilarious moment. And just in terms of, like, the way that this is sung, and if this was the intro track to the album, we talked like in a couple of like our reviews, we've talked about sequencing in terms of like, you know, just how it can help or hurt a record. If this would have been the intro track here, it might not have come off as well as it has for me at this point, because like Death Took a Holiday was a perfect way to introduce everybody. Here we get that smoky jazz barroom like backdrop, but in a horned up way. And like, if that was the first introduction to the record in terms of introducing the vocalist at that point and that style, it might have been a little bit of a turnoff, but here it's absolutely perfection. And outside of the vocals, we get the Barry sax again here doing licks. Like, it's nice and funky. I do love that. And just the overall, like, you know, rhythm section performance, it's so fucking tight. This did land in my top 3 at number 2. So,
ooh, okay.
Yeah, Fishnets and Cigarettes, like, as corny as it is, like, if I were to go back to this record, like, that would be one of the tracks I would be looking forward to the most.
So, a couple of things to clear up lyrically. I'll start with your talk about the way it ended with the paint. The lyrics are, he said that I reminded him of an angel and that he needed a saint. He watched me in the mirror, screw out my lipstick, and he said, baby, now baby, put on the paint. And the other one, and I regret to inform you of this because I was disappointed when I found out myself, he actually isn't saying climax, because I thought the exact same thing. He's not saying climax, he's saying claw marks.
Oh, okay. It changes my perception of it, but it doesn't take away from the enjoyment.
No, because if you still close your eyes and think about it long and hard enough, you can still envision him saying climax, which is funnier. But aside from that, dude, you pretty much nailed everything on the head about this track. The groove is fantastic because you have the Barry sax doing its work. You have what I'm pretty sure is either an alto or soprano doing those little glissandos in the, for lack of a better term, chorus, or the instrumental interludes between the lyrics that are just top notch. The bass and the drums are perfectly in lock. And I also appreciate just how the female vocal on this track, who is Paula Venice for the record, I had to look that up. Paula Venice is the female vocalist on this track, or at least the one who's singing most of the lyrics. There's a background singer as well. She does a great job, and I love the counterpoint and point between her and Toledo on this track, where she sounds somewhat reasonably romantic, and he sounds cartoonishly horny. So cartoonishly horny that it's fun and enjoyable. I do agree with you about the juxtaposition, because had they started with this, a lot of people would probably been like, what is this? What's going on here? He started out being a lot more intellectual. He portrayed smart, insightful commentaries on noirish situations before hitting and slamming the horny button in the middle of the album. And I feel like if he hadn't projected himself to be smarter first and just went full dumb in the start, it would have come off a lot worse. I 100% agree with you on that. But the way it comes across here is just... It sounds so sleazy with the... I mean, it basically sounds one step away from a cheap porno, or at least the media's version of that. But it's so funny, and it's so interesting, and it's so weird, and the backing groove is so nice. I know you joked about this being on your summertime playlist. It's already on mine. It's at number 1. I got it at the top.
Number 1 with a bullet, man. You're coming out swinging with that, man. You know what? I'm gonna put this on my summertime playlist. Actually, I'm not a playlist kind of guy. I'm not like other girls in terms of like constructed playlists. So, but yeah, I can totally respect that. And if it wasn't for... I mean, I haven't revealed my top track yet, but if it wasn't for the way that track just absolutely just, took a stranglehold over my ears and my attention, and like just, my appreciation for the track, like this could have easily been a number 1 track for me. But, I'm glad that I know that starting out the review, I said that we were going to fight. I'm glad that we're not fighting for the most part. I mean, who knows? We've still yet to reveal, more of your bottom tracks, and we have one more of my top tracks yet to go. But before we do that, Matthew.
Yes, Ryan.
If the listener out there is really enjoying the fact that we're bringing up a completely obscure band to their consciousness, and they want to, they're really enjoying the episode that we're doing so far. And they have enjoyed our episodes, up until this point, and will wish to continue to do so. What are some ways that they can show support for us so we can keep on keeping on doing what we do week in and week out for them?
One thing they can do, and the most important thing they can do for the record, is... keep listening to us and keep enjoying what they hear, whether it's listening to our episodes every week, finding us on your favorite podcasting platform of choice, whether it's Spotify, Apple Music, Pocket Cast, any of the other big ones. We have our YouTube page where we put our episodes every week, so if you want to follow us on YouTube, you can hit that subscribe button, like our content. And if you think someone else might like what we're doing, share it with them on our socials. We do have pages on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook. No longer on X. We have switched since. But again, even if you just want to text it to a friend, like that friend you thought, hey, I remember you liked this in college, you want to listen to this? Maybe that's the person you can reach out to. But for those who have been following us and liking our stuff from the beginning, or from any point in time for the matter, we thank you, because we're not sponsored by anybody. We're not part of some major podcasting corporation. We're just two dudes who like music and like talking about music.
And it's been an absolutely blast of a journey, because, we've gotten to share with each other, records that have made an impact on us for one reason or another. So, that's the core reason of this show. And it's been an absolute blast, taking this journey with you. So, in terms of, continuing on this journey, you ready to get into, the last leg of the record here with the next track here, Beat Up Thunderbird?
Yes, Beat Up Thunderbird kicks off the back half of this album, possibly, allegedly, depends on who you ask. It is for us. And Beat Up Thunderbird, once again has a very solid groove. Not quite as deep as Fishnets and Cigarettes, but definitely a groove worthy to stand up on its own. The vocals, unfortunately, do go back to being slightly overprocessed. And not only that, but there are moments, and I know we talked about this a little earlier on Sonny and Lorraine, where he does those vocals that it didn't occur to me until my second listen through for this review of this, that a lot of times you'll hear people, particularly music historians, talk about how jazz vocalists, or rather rock vocalists, or any type of vocalist, tend to capture a certain instrument with the way that they sound. How, like, Ella Fitzgerald can sing like a flute or a trombone, or how the lead singers of the Byrds, like Roger McGuinn, could sound like, a very soaring jet of a sense. Here you have Toledo doing riffs that sound like a squawking saxophone. Because he does those little... And here's the thing. If you take away the filter, if you take away the AM radio, telephone, whatever the hell you want to call it, filter, I'm down with it. I'm down with the artistic, creative craziness. But to add that extra layer of rasp on top of rasp, as I've been saying, takes away from the song. Now, that being said, it is not a bottom track for me. It's not. It's not in my bottom three. But it did sort of put things back into the position they were before Fishnets and Cigarettes, which wasn't bad, but not quite up to the level snuff. Lyrically, this is probably the most interesting part of the song, because I'm not sure what exactly the premise of the song is. I've narrowed it down to two possibilities. Either it's a song about a girl or woman who has met a guy who has a beat-up Thunderbird and is so turned on by it that she will ride with him no matter where it goes because it is a Thunderbird, or it's a situation where a girl meets a guy and it just happens to be in a beat-up Thunderbird. And the Thunderbird is just part of this long list of descriptors that the song has describing the situation that it is. I'll start with the second verse just as an example. One headlight, dark eyes, screamed it's all right, leather seats, soft lips, ripped seats, deep hips, a missing license plate, I'll make you love that what you hate, rusted chrome, chip paint, she smiles like a saint, a beat-in grill, it's worth it for the thrill, a beat-up Thunderbird, little girl, never said a word. So, again, I don't know if she loves the Thunderbird or the Thunderbird is just a piece. It's either the subject or it's the setting. In either case, I like the song. Not my top three, not my bottom three.
Okay, good. So we're not gonna fight. Yeah. This took the crown for me.
Wow.
And it's mainly because the way that I listened to this record in terms of my first listen through for the review here is I stopped for my first spin of it. I stopped at Fishnets and Cigarettes, and then I picked back up with Beat Up Thunderbird for my on the next day, and the way that it just kicks everything back off for me with that bass line that is gonna be stuck in my head into the day that I die. It's just so hypnotic. It's so good. And on top of the bass line, I feel like all the other instruments are off doing their own time signatures in terms of what they're bringing to the table, and we're veering back into the territory of Death Took a Holiday, where we're getting back into the freeform kind of sections here, and this is very much coded right up my alley in terms of my appreciation, and for the ability. I mean, I could be mistaken here, but this is the way that I came across. So for the ability for each instrument to be doing their own time signature, but yet for it to sound coherent was just absolutely mind-boggling to me. It's so good. And then for the drum to come in, I would say probably maybe close to halfway into the track, and for it to actually establish a solid groove, countering the insanity that's been going on with the other instruments was just another added element that I really did appreciate. And also just another thing on the instrumental front that I really did like and I picked up that probably took this track over the edge for me. I might be trying to stretch this here, but hear me out. So, like, there's sections where it seems like the sax player is trying to go off into a solo, but he has, like, almost like a failure to launch. And, like, the way that the instruments are interacting with the sax when he's trying to take off and do that solo, it almost seems like they're holding him back. Like, they're creating, like, a barrier there in terms of, like, oh, hey, yeah, you want to go back into, like, the traditional stuff? No, not today. We're going to keep getting freaky here. We're going to still be in our beat up Thunderbird. And I love that. I don't know if that was done on purpose or if that was just me, like, making a mountain out of a molehill. But, still, it was a great thing for me to catch. And you really just unlocked a new part of my brain whenever you were saying, like, the singer here, the way that he emotes and he's using his vocal licks in certain phrases, it's like, it's intended to be like almost like another saxophone player. Maybe that's why it appeals to me so much, because, like, I'm on the other end and I know that sound and I'm attracted to that sound. Not saying that you're attracted, but, like, that always just grabs my ears whenever a sax player comes across. And that's probably why maybe, like, I don't want to say I'm blinded by, but, like, it just seems like when it comes up with the vocal screeches that I'm more attracted to that. And for you, it's just something that's just like, you're maybe going a little, it's a little distasteful and it's a little bit too much. But yeah, Beat Up Thunderbird, easy for me to give this a crown. This is my favorite track off the whole record.
I respect the hell out of that. Again, there are the sax section that you mentioned. I'll have to go back and listen for that because I did not pick up on that at all the couple of times I listened to it. Again, probably because I was so taken aback by the raggedness of everything else, particularly the vocals, the lyrics, and the beat of itself. But one other note I did have is that we've talked about this several times, most notably in the episode on the Cure album Disintegration, where tracks breathe at the end. This feels like this track breathes, or at least allows space at the end, which is kind of funny to me, only because usually whenever, especially on Disintegration, where the tracks breathe, it's a sort of very nice, melodic type of groove that they have going on. Here it's so ragged that it feels like the concept of breathing seems a little ironic, because it feels so, like, it's breathing in the same sense that you just smoked an entire pack of Marlboros breathing, where it's just like, but that's their prerogative, that's their intent, and I kind of dug that a little bit too. But yeah, no, I can appreciate why you have this track in the top spot, and I'll have to probably give this a listen to figure out some of the spots you were talking about.
So I think I'm ready to, as much as it's gonna pain me to get away from Beat Up Thunderbird, I feel like I'm ready to boogie on over to the next track here, Just Enough. And man, for me, I don't want to discredit what Just Enough brings to the table, but coming off the complete euphoria feeling that I had with just Beat Up Thunderbird, Just Enough, I'm going to be honest, it was a bit of a whiplash, and in the sense of we go from, like, that kind of, like, what that song brings to the table to, like, essentially an 8-minute song that is just primarily a smooth salsa kind of song, which, I mean, it's good in its own right, what it brings to the table, but yeah, just the drum beat is just very smooth. I do like what it's bringing to the table there, and just the little moments here or there where you get the piano sprinkles. Like, I do like what's going on there, and the bass lick also is very solid, But like I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't have much else to say other than that when it comes to Just Enough, and that's because like the vocal performance, it's good in its own right, but the track does basically kind of meander for like a good bit in my ears. It does do enough, just enough to create to not fall into a bottom track kind of territory, but probably by like minute like 5 and 6, I'm like, oh god, this is an 8 minute long track. Like they could have probably cut this down by a little bit, because like after a while my brain just went on an autopilot, and I would say like this is probably the first time in the record that I had that feeling, which is not a good feeling when it comes to like this kind of music, and well, just music in general. But yeah, like Just Enough. Like it's good in its own right. It's not a bottom track. I don't have a bottom track, and yeah, it just it had the potential to be a bottom track, but for the sake of redundancy, I rest my case. The floor is yours.
So I will start by saying I agree with you on having that same moment of autopilot towards the end of the song, because this song is long. It's like 8 minutes and it just goes on and on and on. However, I will also admit that that moment of autopilot was probably the best feeling I had during this song, because we have arrived at my second least favorite track on the album. And there are two main reasons why. Number one, once again, are the lyrics. Because, don't get me wrong, I understand that, especially on songs like Sonny and Lorraine, you can paint a picture of a volatile couple dealing with their own BS in a way that seems artistic. But I'm just going to read you some of the lines here. Sometimes he slaps her around with words till her heartbeat hits the floor. He breaks her down, 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 till she just can't take no more. He rapes her soul again and again and again and again and again. Then he kissed her 'cause he missed her, 'cause she's his best friend. And you know that he drinks too much, and you know that she loves too much, I'm paraphrasing. They lie to each other much too much, but they love each other just enough to keep coming back. Once again, I don't want to come off as a prude, but that as soon as I heard those lines, I'm like, come on, man. Like, you don't need to be telling me this. Especially when you use words like rape and visions of he hits her in ways that are like, oh, but it's artistic. I didn't need to hear that. But I think what made it worse was the fact that they put this grim couple and their grim ways in a grim description and backdropped it with what is honestly a rather very good groove. Like, the groove is slick. Like, this is some good backing performance by the band. But for some reason, the way it's just this very smooth jazz light combo with these very rugged, ugly first minutes of a Law & Order SVU episode lyrics, it turned me off so much where I was just like, no. And especially for 7 minutes. Again, the autopilot was the best part of the song, because I was just like, okay, I can just enjoy the groove and not pay attention to what is being said right now. And that's why I had to put this at my second bottom worst.
I'm glad that we're not going to fight. And like, oh man, again, the alternative reality, whenever I have full access to all the lyrics here and I actually zoom in on this, this would probably have popped into my a bottom track for me. But yeah, I don't know. And I to your defense, in terms of you said oh, I don't want to come across as a prude. I'm sure that there's countless amount of examples that we can come up with in terms of just where the subject material has been breached before in our show, but the artist who has covered it in the past handled it with a much more of an effective performance and a much more artistic flair. But Yeah, like I think I've had just enough of just enough. So, are you ready to talk to me about the Pistol of a Cuban Girl?
Yes, I am ready to talk about the Pistol of a Cuban Girl. And we get another song that is very long, but unlike Just Enough, this song is actually very good. It starts with a very opening somewhat similar to Death Took a Holiday, except instead of a tom-tom drum roll, it's a bongo roll or a conga roll, if you will. We get a very Cuban sound with Pistol of a Cuban Girl, because you get those bongos, you get that flamenco guitar, and it feels like you're being taken on a trip south of the border. And it also creates a perfect setup for a noir narrative that has been, again, processed throughout this whole album for the most part. And it fits really, really well with the raspy vocals that Toledo has. And they make more sense with the filter this time. Again, it still sounds a little much, but it fits. It fits a lot better on this track because you get him sort of telling this story about a night with this Cuban femme fatale that goes, spoiler alert, terribly, very, very wrong. And I'll just sort of read you the first lines to give you an idea of where this is going. It was a heated Friday night, and all the beds were full tonight. And it seemed like the whole damn world was getting laid, except for me, see? Because I was sitting on top of my suitcase, like I was sitting on top of the world, and everything was in its place. Till I seen that Cuban girl. She was floating through a cigarette tucked inside a dream. So, that's how it starts. He's allured into this girl, and he thinks it's going to be the night of his life, and in a somewhat dark sense it is. I'm not going to spoil too much. But, the lyrics are great. The groove on this track is really, really good. I had just listened a few days ago to Supernatural by Santana, and there was a lot of that on that album that kind of reminded me of this, and I really appreciated that. There's a great, I want to say samba groove, but it's definitely a Cuban groove. It's a Latin groove, for lack of a better term, and it's really, really good. And something you could definitely appreciate for as long as it goes, which again is almost, I want to say, over 8 minutes on this track. And I also dug the fact that for the first time on this entire album, with the exception of, I think, Fishnets and Cigarettes, you get what qualifies as a repeating chorus that you hear at multiple points throughout the song. I was like, oh, this almost has a pop structure to it. I can appreciate that. So yeah, I really dug Pistol of a Cuban Girl quite a bit. It does get a little long in the tooth, which probably kept it out of anything higher than what it is, but it is very high for me. I have completed my top 3. This is number 2.
Oh man. Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, we've yet to hit another bottom track for you.
That is correct.
Yeah, and that's exciting, and we only have a certain amount of tracks left, so I can only guess what your bottom track is going to be. But yeah. Anyways, moving over to my thoughts about Pistol of a Cuban Girl. I almost, catch me on a different day, and this could have been a top track for me, to be honest with you, in terms of just my overall appreciation for it. The way that it starts out, where you get that freeform spoken word intro with that Spanish guitar flaring in the background, that was nice, and the way that it just transitioned into that groove that you discussed is so good. And that way that groove gets established over time, it's absolutely great. The way that the performances line up there it's really, really solid. And just the lead singer here, he really does know how to sink his teeth into this song. He does really, he does a fantastic job. And it's a damn shame that you mentioned, not specifically that you mentioned this, but the fact that they don't really have any other music other than like this album, because like it's really good, and I would really love to hear more material from this guy and this band as a whole. But outside of the vocals, like the way I said, it's funny that I mentioned outside of the vocals, but I'm going to mention more vocal stuff. But like I really love the section in this track here where him and the guitar are hitting offbeat notes, and it's very pronounced. Like that's a very solid moment for me. Like I love that, and it shows that the oftentimes like I really get attracted to in music in our show here where the guitars line up with the vocals. It almost seems like they're both just becoming one here. It's almost just like the vocals are just trying to become like another instrument instead of trying to deliver like a specific message. So that's really good. And also just another like nerdy moment that I really did dig in this track here is where the singer sings a line about like a couple talking in Spanish, and the way that the instruments echo that, it's almost like it's an actual conversation. Like I love that. Oh my god. Like thank you for that nerdy little moment that I dug into there. But yeah, quite honestly, in hindsight, I would probably move Saxface down to, number 5 in my track appreciation, and this would have been a number 4 for me if we were ranking like 1 through 4, ranking the tracks properly. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of Pistol of a Cuban Girl.
I'm glad you brought up that section about the speaking in English, because I thought that was the funniest moment on the record. I laughed out loud when I heard that, or rather speaking in Spanish. Because I'm thinking, okay, you have this Cuban beat, you're talking to a Cuban girl, and yet you're surprised that other people around you are speaking in Spanish. Like, that's just, mwah. It's so funny and stupid. Like, I'm just thinking, dude, what did you think you were getting yourself into? But yeah, no, that part really just made me holler. But aside from that, again, it was, this song is quite the ride of a story, and it just works so well. And I'm glad you liked it as much as you did too. Are you ready to pivot over to the penultimate track, which is Dead Man's Cigarette?
Absolutely, and I'm ready for you to tear this track to shreds. I mean, it could be like the final track, but I feel like Dead Man's Cigarette is like you're not a fan of that cigarette, but I could be wrong. Who knows? But yeah, like we go full bore here in terms of just like really embracing like off the wall like freeform stuff in terms of like how the track is recorded and just the different kind of like instrumentations. Like the vocals are so far in the foreground and the instrumentals are so far in the background that if this track here specifically was not recorded live, I would be very disappointed and I would be very confused on how they actually recorded it. But just like more about the track here specifically, it's not really so much of an the instrumentals here are not really a focus at all. It's more spoken word than actual track. Like you get the random hits of percussion and you get the occasional horn hits along like some tribal singing, which like was an interesting flair for me. But in terms of just like all the other like different flavors that we've gotten in the record so far, like this is basically I feel like we're just coming down from the high and we're just really like it's almost like we're about to like pass out from the night that we've had, or we're facing death itself. And the only other note I have about Dead Man's Cigarette here is I'm always a fan of a good sax squawk. Yeah. Other than that, I mean, the track didn't do nearly enough as compared to like Saxface or Pistol of the Cuban Girl to really be in contention for like a top track spot. But I would put this maybe ahead of Danny and Sonny Lorraine. So, like, if I had to rank the tracks properly, I don't know why I'm doing this. This would be, like, number 6 on the record here. So, like, I'm a fan of Dead Man Cigarette, but, yeah, it's there for a specific purpose, and I don't think it's trying to do anything that it isn't doing, as redundant and as plain toast as that sounds.
I get where you're coming from with that, and I do agree with you that I think that is what this song intended to be, a very end of the night, end of the ride. It's 4 a.m. and everything's getting a little past due. It's time to go to bed type of vibe with this track. But even with that being the case, your instincts were correct. This is my least favorite song on the track, and it's for a very, very simple reason. It sounds like absolute garbage. Because, once again, we have the overprocessed vocals that Toledo has, which I'm not going to pounce on too much, because honestly, they're par for the course. They're what you expect. But to have the backing that it does, the note I have is that it sounds like a drunk person walking through an attic. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like he's just like trying to find something that's been buried there since 1983, and he has no idea where he's going. He's just kicking stuff around, and they just said, all right, we'll mic that up and make that our backing for this track. Why not? And it just sounds so bad. Like, again, I get what they were going for, but unpleasant is unpleasant, and this track is about as unpleasant as it gets. It's probably one of the worst tracks that I've reviewed on this show, to be completely honest with you, just objectively speaking. And the only other note I have is that it sounds almost like the band is parodying itself by doing this. Like, earlier on, they had great grooves, and they had, much more tighter stories, and here it just sounds like, especially with the backing as sparse as it is, they're trying to do the down low, we're all exhausted thing, but it doesn't even sound exhausted. It doesn't even sound like they're trying to put one last effort in, they can't do it. It just sounds like they're not trying at all. Toledo does sound like he's trying, but the rasp on top of the rasp on top of the drunk man in the attic, I don't want that to be counting as music. I'm sorry.
I mean, I would count that as music, and also Drunk Man in the Attic. That would be an excellent beer name, but, that's a different story for a different day. Yeah, I can definitely respect your criticisms of the track here. I knew as soon as I was talking about how the vocals are recorded so far in the foreground and the instrumentals were so far in the back, and just like how just you get the random nonsensical hits of percussion, I can really I was seeing the framework that was being laid out for you to come through there and be like, no, this is just dog shit. Oh man, also for you to say this is one of the worst tracks in the history of the show here that you've reviewed, that's, I don't want to say that's high praise, but that's low praise. So,
it's low.
It's a high bar to clear, I would say so. So, yeah. I don't really have much else to really, counteract with in terms of your criticisms about Dead Man Cigarette. You're ready to hit us with the final track here, which is Cinderella.
Yes, Cinderella. And this is very much a end credits track, if there ever was one. Because basically all you have is Toledo's vocal with very, very good piano. It's almost too good for this track. It's just doing runs up and down the piano. Very Freddie Mercury-esque, or very Liberace-esque, if you want to go that route. And the lyrics, too, are pretty good, or at least conceptually, it's pretty good. I'll just read a few of them off. Sometimes I feel like Cinderella after the ball. I watch happy couples walk hand in hand to that forever after all. I realize I got no one to call, and I just feel like Cinderella after the ball. That itself is just a good concept for a song, and I feel like a lot of other bands probably could, if they haven't already, could do that take. But to hear Toledo on this track, it's a nice send-off. It's a nice moment of clarity after all the adventures that we've had on this album, good and bad. Vocals are par for the course again. Didn't like them, didn't hate them. Like the piano, and yeah, that's that.
Yeah, and I don't really have much else to add onto that. I mean, for like the piano part very much sounds like, walking, like for me it gave me like flashbacks of walking into like the music building at Geneva, where you hear the piano music majors like going and riffing off of stuff, like it definitely does give me that vibe. And like I do like how everything is just wrapped up very neat and concise, and how we get the lyric that you mentioned, like feeling like Cinderella after the ball. Like this almost seems like, Toledo's had one hell of a night, and now he's just literally going into bed. He's just like, I've had one hell of a day, and I feel like Cinderella after the ball. I feel like, the party's over, and now it's time to go to bed. But yeah, it's a solid way for the album to wrap up for me as well.
Yeah, and personally, I would have loved this to be the follow-up to Pistol of a Cuban Girl rather than Dead Man's Cigarette. Just get rid of that track entirely and end this on a nice note. But it is what it is, and because it is what it is, and we've gone through what it is, we can say those magic words.
We did it, man.
We did it, man. We traveled to Toledo, we put on our fishnets, we lit up our cigarettes, and we went on several journeys that range from chaos to more chaos.
So, I'm going to go first with my overall thoughts and feelings about the album, my overall rating. So, at the end of last week's review, whenever you mentioned that this was going to be the album and artists that we were going to be covering, I equated this to such a positive experience as compared to whenever you brought in Jellyfish into my consciousness in terms of my musical fandom. I was not ready for what this album was going to bring to my bring to my ears. It's an incredibly unique album, and like I said earlier in the review, it's a damn shame that this group, you don't need to always create more music, but I would have loved to hear at least one or two more records out of these guys. But life gets in the way, and for them to have this be their definitive statement, it was really good. The album absolutely floored me. I know we there was a couple moments in the review where we had some disagreements. They're healthy disagreements. You want to take the song Dead Man's Cigarette, and you want to just be like, hey, this should be the promotional use for not smoking in America. But for me, I can't, I know I said Just Enough was barely hanging on in terms of it could have sunk into a bottom track for me, but I do appreciate the multiple different styles that the band's bringing to the table. The performances are solid head to toe. I like the my top three, I mentioned, are good in their own right, but we talked about Pistol of a Cuban Girl, Saxface, disagreement about Dead Man's Cigarette, and even the other quote unquote album tracks that I mentioned, Danny and Sonny Lorraine, they're really good in their own right. So this is a really good album, and I want to thank you for bringing it to my table in terms of bringing it to at least into my life, because I had a absolutely great time reviewing this record and checking it out with you. So in terms of a rating, I'm going to give it a very beefy, solid 9.5 out of 10.
Wow, 9.5. All right. I appreciate that I was able to select, because I don't think that I've done that for you, where I've selected an album where you were just like, holy crap, this is amazing. I've or at least one that you appreciate as much as you did, and a little bit of a spoiler, more than I did, because For me, this album to me is, like you say, very unique. I've never heard anything like it before, and I will say that my appreciation of it did grow with each passing listen. Like, the first time I was like, I'm not so sure about this. Second time I was like, okay, there's some stuff here I like. And the third time I was like, okay, I think I get what they're going for here. Now, granted, there are some duds. Dead Man Cigarettes, just awful. Just Enough and Downtown are seedy to the point of not really appreciable. But the band sounds good pretty much throughout the entire project. And if not for that one crucial thing, that filter on the vocals, I might have it close to where you have it. Like, because as far as what they wanted to do, provide this neo-noir, 90s jazz funk mix to the table, they succeeded. Like, lyrically, they succeeded. Performance-wise, they succeeded. It's just production-wise, they made that one crucial error that really sapped a couple tracks of future listenability. So that being said, I like this album. I do like this album, and I'll probably give it a spin a time or two in the future. But it's not going to be on the regular side except for the aforementioned few tracks like Pistol of a Cuban Girl, like Fishnets and Cigarettes, like Saxface. I am going to give this album a 7.5 out of 10.
So your 7.5 and my 9.5 come out to equal out to be an average of 8.5 out of 10. Because
Math
works, everybody. And talk about like Uno reverse cards, man. Like I think this might be like one of the very few times in our show where the person who brought the record to the table enjoyed it I would say a hair less than the counterpart in the show. I mean, you have the full reviews and like our scores, so feel free to text me later on about that. But like that's incredibly unique, man. And I'm here for it though. It's funny that we started the whole episode talking about like our takeaways from Bon Iver's record that we just reviewed, and how art is subjective, and like it's just a unique thing. So in terms of next album recommendations, I was about to struggle so hard with this, but thankfully enough, there was a certain music publication out there called Pitchfork that they recently, on Sundays they have their Sunday review special, and there was one album that they, highlighted in that section. They gave it a 10 out of 10. And I, listened to it because I was very, somewhat aware of this artist. So, that's going to be my next album recommendation. And that album is by Tom Waits. And the album is Rain Dogs. And the reason why I'm basically recommending this album, if you've enjoyed, Fishnets and Cigarettes by Toledo, or inversely, if you've enjoyed that Tom Waits album and you've gotten to this point in this review and you're looking for a good, even more of a push to check out Toledo, this would be just a way for me to springboard that. But yeah, that album, you get the smoky kind of jazz kind of singer, maybe not so much of the processed AM radio effect that you described, but the vocal performance is there, and overall it has that very smoky kind of atmosphere. Yeah, it's a solid album. So for me, my next album recommendation is going to be Rain Dogs by Tom Waits.
I was funny because I did read a couple reviews of this album. I think there was one from the LA Times that mentioned that Toledo sounded like Tom Waits. So I was going to listen to a little bit of Tom Waits beforehand to perhaps have a recommendation of my own from that side. But instead, my recommendation is going to come from the jazz side of Toledo. And for those who appreciate the modern jazz sounds on here and the twists and turns on traditional jazz that this album brings, I am going to recommend an album that you, Ryan, recommended me several years ago. Now, I will warn you, this album is very, very long. Much longer than this. But it's worth it because it is just 3 hours of great jazz, and that is The Epic by Kamisi Washington. Very much of the same brand of modern jazz. It's a bit more, it's much more instrumental. There are some good vocals on the track, but if you're looking for something that's in the same vein of jazz mixed with funk, mixed with certain political elements, because there are a couple tracks on there like that, The Epic by Kamasi Washington is where I would send you next.
So, to recap as a complete package, ladies and gentlemen, if you've explored Toledo's Fishnets and Cigarettes, and you're looking to go to just another quick album that both me and Matt would recommend, I recommend Rain Dogs by Tom Waits, and Matt recommends The Epic by Kamasi Washington. So, yeah, one hell of a review, man. I had a blast, man.
I know. Again, I'm glad you appreciated this album as much as you did, because I'm not sure what. I mean, obviously there's a very specific audience for this type of music, but I feel honored adding another member to that audience today.
Yeah. So we got one more thing in terms of adding stuff to things before we can officially pump this review into bed.
Yes, it is your turn once again to pick an album. Where are we going next?
So, earlier in the review here, I brought up the genre of nu metal. That's where we're going next. So, and the way that I'm going to have you choose between the two albums. And keep in mind, nu metal kind of has it's a catch-all kind of genre. So we're not, I'm going to spoil it now. We're not going to be talking about Limp Bizkit, okay? I'm going to have you choose between two events that have happened in history. And the years that these events have occurred are the same year that the specific album in question was released. So the two events are Mariah Carey's Glitter album is released in September, or Vladimir Putin starts his first term as Russia's president.
Well, I'm going to make this as easy as possible. Though I have not seen the movie, I am going to choose Mariah Carey over Vladimir Putin, like any sane person should.
Okay, so full disclosure, before I reveal the album here, do you know what year an event that I'm talking about?
The year I believe is 2001.
Yep, and I mentioned September, right? So yeah, I'm veering off of that potential, internet dark hole to reveal that our next album is gonna be by the band System of a Down, and the album is gonna be Toxicity.
Oh yeah, baby, let's. Of all the nu metal options we have, you pick one of the very best. I am down to clown with this.
Alright, so, ladies and gentlemen, if it's been a while, or if you've never listened to Toxicity by System of a Down, make sure you check out that album before next week's review. That way you can, have opinions about the records, and you can have opinions about the opinions that me and Matt are going to be bringing to the table. Yeah. Any other notes to add about System of a Down, Toxicity, Toledo before we officially put this review into bed here, man?
Just one, and that's the fact that high heels, fishnets, and cigarettes can't melt steel beams.